Ray Dalio is the legendary billionaire investor
who decoded the cycles of human history to predict financial crashes,
build the world's largest hedge fund,
and now to warn us about what lies ahead.
Today we have a video from Ray Dalio. I watched more than 1 hour of this podcast interview, and I extracted the most valuable points, the most impactful one. I believe that it was from 1 hour and something, it was like down to 10-15 minutes. But before we start, I want to say that I was pleasantly surprised. Actually, I was impressed with the fact that Ray Dalio is not, or it's a lot more than just a billionaire. You know, he shares in this video foundational principles of life that made him successful. You see, most people pay attention to him to learn about money, to become financially educated. But in fact, you can learn from him life principles that will make you successful, not just at life, but also with your finances. That's why, for me, I'm an absolute fan. I never knew how much wisdom, how much experience this man has, but I became an instant fan. In this video and others, he shares about meditation and how that played a role. And meditation is not really sexy. It's not really, most people feel like, meditation, okay, calming the mind, blah, blah, blah. But one of the most successful people on this planet, he talks about how important meditation was in his life. He also talks about spirituality. At one point, you're going to see that he says, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And he talks about reflection, living a good life, impact, purpose, and like I said, meaningful work and relationship, and enjoying your work, like transforming, like making your passion and your work the same thing. We are going to learn a lot from this man, and I promise you that I'm going to make other videos from him because he needs to be studied. This man, when I watched him, it was very funny that I was thinking like, my God, this guy thinks exactly like me. Like, this is my principle. I talk about truth. I talk about reflection. With all my coaching clients, I advise them about reflection, all of it. The only difference is that, well, it's just a few billions difference, but I love him and I will study him. This is just the first video, so let's watch.
And you have to understand that you're on an adventurous journey, okay? And you have a certain nature, those qualities that make you have your preferences and so on. And then you're going after the things that you like, and you're learning, and it's going to have the ups and downs and so on, and how you approach that. So you asked from...
First, he shares about our life being a journey. And most people actually forget about this when we go about our everyday and we get tangled into things, and we forget that life is a daring adventure or nothing at all. What he shares is the fact that, look, you are on a journey, but in order for you to be on a journey, you have to already be committed to something. Like you have to go after something. You have to want and desire something, and then put your mind into it, apply yourself to it, and go like, okay, how do I do this? Most people, unfortunately, they're not on a journey. They're not really living their life. They're just existing. And this is so important to understand that, look, if you are not on a journey, you should be. Like, your life should be an adventure. You should go after things. You should try to achieve things. And, in the process of that, how he shares, there are going to be ups and downs, but eventually you're going to have to process that and become better and, go after it again. And that makes it a journey. But unfortunately, most people are not on their journey yet because they don't even know what to do. They don't know what they want. They're just like clueless. And most of the times they are clueless because they don't spend time to reflect. They don't spend time to think, what do I want from my life? This is a man who actually was very, as you are going to see, he was very intentional, very directional and mindful about his life. He shares a lot about reflection, and every time when he was challenged by something, he was struggle with something, and he went through a lot of hardship, he would take a step back and think like, wait, okay, so what am I dealing with? What's the best way to deal with this? And what should I do next? He was very methodical about his life. But most people, because they don't put time to reflect, to zoom out, to evaluate their life and hopefully see something like a better direction, they are never on a journey. Their journey never started.
The higher level, if I'm looking down, you know, like that life cycle, that arc.
By the way, pause the video, and I think this is made by him. He shared this. It's not really visible. I'm sorry for the way I cropped it, but on the blue side of things, this is 0 years. This is you're just born, and the yellow, it's like 80 years old. So he shares some of the things that you might encounter, most of the things that you might encounter in your life, and how that is part of a journey, part of like almost like a life cycle. You should pause the video and take a look at this, because you might recognize, oh yeah, I just bought a car. Oh yeah, I just got married. Oh yeah, I just had a child. Or wherever you are somewhere in this cycle of life, how he describes it.
What's that journey like? How do you approach it? You know, what are your principles?
What do you mean by nature?
People are born with, and then also their environment creates their different nature, you know? We have our preferences, our inclinations. We think in a certain way. You chose to be entrepreneurial. Okay, you're living out your nature. Okay, this isn't for somebody else. You know, some people have a different nature. Okay, they would like to have the stability of a job and clarity and so on. So when you have your nature, you want to know that and then find the path that is going to be good for your nature.
So if I want to...
One just addition on this, it absolutely what he's saying, it's true. Like, we all have our own inclinations and our nature, the result, the whole macro result of all those inclinations and preferences is what he is calling our nature. It is true. One thing that I would just add on this is that, well, sometimes as you are a result of your environment and all the experience that you had in your life, that being your nature, it might not necessarily be something that you want to continue. Your nature might not be, or your inclinations or where you are in life right now might not necessarily be the best position where you could be. Maybe you were born in an environment that is not really healthy for you. Maybe you didn't have the right people around you. Maybe you didn't have the right influence around you. And then eventually your nature becomes something that you should change. This is just like one thing to add. Like, if your nature is something that it's geared towards truth, you have good character, like you want to contribute value, like you come from a good place and you want to bring value to the world, then I guess you are just like lucky that the fact that, you know, you're brought up in good conditions, so therefore the result of you is good. However, sometimes that's not always the case. And then the only thing that I would add on this, you have to reflect. You have to look at yourself and go like, okay, what is my nature? Like, really objectively, is it good? Am I contributing something good? Am I contributing value? If I would continue the way I've been living my life in the past years, how would my life look like in 10, 20 years from now? And then if you look at that, maybe you might realize that, oh, I don't like what I see in the future. I don't want my future to look like that. So then I have to change my nature in the present. So then I will enjoy different things. I will prefer different things. I will be, you know, oriented towards different things, and I will rebuild myself, right? And in order to do that, you just sometimes have to look at your environment, look at the people around you, look at your friends, look at everything around you that resulted in you being in a way that it's not really serving you, or it's not really good. Looking at all of that, which is the result of who you are right now, and go like, well, it looks like I need to change something, and then address this part of the nature of you.
To be an entrepreneur and I want to build a technology company, do you think I should be in the UK or the US?
I think you should be in the US.
Why?
The US has a culture of entrepreneurship, inventiveness. There's a whole different culture. There are 5 big...
Well, the only thing I would say that, well, it's true that some economies, they're just a filter for certain things, maybe entrepreneurship, maybe creativity, maybe both, but it's more like discovering like where you belong. This is really the key. I don't really necessarily agree with this part, like, oh, US is best for entrepreneurs, so you're an entrepreneur, you should go to US. Well, you can be an entrepreneur in other places, and depending on your nature, like who you are and what are your preferences, you might just be a better fit somewhere else. So that's why always life decisions like this, they're meant to just made by yourself with considering everything that is important around you. You might consider people who are around you, maybe you have business, you have family, all of those, but the decision is ultimately yours. You can always consider what other people are saying and say like, okay, that's good for you, that's good for you, but you have to understand what's good for me. And by the way, this is not like in a selfish kind of way. This is how decisions are made. Good decisions have this almost like selfish kind of nature to them, because you are the one who is going to live the consequences of your decision.
Forces that create a big cycle that lasts about 80 years, give or take 50, let's say. And the five big forces are: there's a money, debt, economy force, okay? Debt's their spending power. So what happens is when you give somebody credit, they can spend. And then, but it also produces debt. And debt has to be paid back. And so what happens is if there's not enough income to pay back the debt, then you have debt rising relative to income. It squeezes out spending. People don't want to hold the debt assets, and so on. The UK is going through that and has gone through that, and it's connected to the second force. And we're all going through this in varying degrees. The second force is the internal political and social force. In other words, like between the left and the right, with wealth gaps and opportunities gaps. We have big wealth and opportunities gaps. So when you have big wealth and opportunities gaps, there's conflict. Conflict between the left and the right. And when you get to the situation where you don't believe the system is working for you and you don't trust the system, then there are wars, there are internal conflicts over that and so on. So the third force is the geopolitical force. In other words, there's a cycle that usually goes from one big war to another big war. So the last war ended in 1944, and we began a new order in 1945. And the way that works is that the winners of the war determine how the world order works. They draw borders, they say, here's how it's going to work, and that's the new order. Okay. And that continues until there's a rising power challenging an existing power in the existing world order, which typically is deteriorating at that time. And then you have international conflict, okay? These orders, there's a monetary order, they all break down. There's an internal political order, they all break down. And there's a geopolitical order, they all have this conflict, and they work together. The fourth force throughout history has been acts of nature. Droughts, floods, and pandemics, for example, have killed more people than wars. And acts of nature. Nature has a big effect. And then number five force is man's inventiveness, particularly of new technologies. Okay? Because if you see that inventiveness, that has raised per capita incomes, GDP per capita, any measures of the living standards over a period of time, and so on. We have to enable people.
So I think that it's very important, if you want to be successful, to study these principles that he is sharing. I'm not going to get into them because I myself have to study this, and it's super valuable. But I know that he shares he also has like a YouTube channel, and he shares some of those principles in very good format, explained very well. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is this. You need to understand how the world works. In order to be successful, to have a good life, on one side, yeah, of course, it's the personal side of things. It's your habits, your relationships, and being healthy, and all the all the personal side of things. But on the other side, you have this macro context which you are you're a part of, and you live in a country, in an economy, and then there are in that country and economy there are different forces, different conflicts, things are changing, and then outside of that the country itself is also part of something larger. There is this international kind of context that influences countries, influences each other, and also all sorts of moving parts, and you are somewhere in there. What is really important for you to be successful is to study this. You see, most people just think success is like, I'm going to set up a goal and then I'm going to pursue it, and if I achieve my goal, I will be successful. But you cannot really truly be successful if you don't understand yourself first, and if you don't understand where that self, you, does fit in the larger scope of things inside of the market, inside of the country, inside of like the international context. Like, you have to understand the moving parts and where you are, such that you can allow yourself the freedom, the liberty to pivot, to shift. This is one of the most important parts, because pursuing goals is not something that happens linear. Like, I sit down and I'm thinking about a goal, like, oh my God, what do I want to achieve? This. And then I just blindly pursue that and I ignore everything. I don't care about anything else. Nothing else is going to affect me because I have my goal. It's not true. And this is not how life works. You are part of a context. And Ray Dalio is actually, he's a big proponent of this principle, like life cycle, having this arc where you are in a certain journey, you are part of a context. He speaks a lot about zooming out. So for you to be successful, you have to study this. You have to study how money works. You have to study like really what's going on in your country and in the world, and then zoom out, reflect, and see like, okay, what do I want to do about this? That's super important.
Okay. What works is finding great people, talented people, and identifying those who you want to bet on and enabling them. And that works. That's the most important force, much more important than money. The United States on the one side, let's say, and China and the allies, their allies on the other side. I mean, in the news, you just saw the meetings of Xi, Putin, Modi, and that group over there walking down, and okay. So now it should be pretty clear how the sides are lining up.
So you see, talking about context, you also have to be you have to understand that your country, wherever you are, you might be from the US, you might be from somewhere else, your country itself is a part of an international context, and that context is also part of a lot of tension and a lot of moving parts. Like, there is a lot of dynamic moving parts in there, and you might start a business that will then be affected by forces that you are not aware of, or you were like blind to because you didn't pay attention. This is one of the most important parts. How many stories do we hear about this person started a restaurant here and the restaurant was very successful and everything was going just great until out of nowhere there is a new law that just crashed his business to the ground? And he didn't pay attention that that law was about to be adopted, and he just moved forward like nothing happened. He was oblivious. This person was, like ignorant of the moving parts and the context. Otherwise, if they would have the information, if they would know in advance, oh, I want to start this restaurant, I want to place it here, but at the same time, if I would know that this law is going to change and is going to just obliterate my business, I would not start it. So you see, information is power. This is one of the reasons why I do this kind of videos. It's not because I'm trying to teach you, well, I have some things to add as well, but mainly it's because I'm studying. I'm like, let me learn from the best. And by the way, I want to say this. I know that the video right now it's speed up to 1.5. I had to do this because otherwise I would make the video too long. So bear with me. Like if you see Ray talking too fast, he's not edgy, he's not anxious, he is still calm, cool, and collected. But I had to speed it up a little bit. Hopefully that's okay. Let me go back a bit.
So we have a great, technology war, which can be used to create great advances, but at the same time can be used for great conflicts. And so now the question is going to be who wins the technology war, because the winner of the technology war is going to win all wars.
Yeah, it's very true. Paying attention to the developments, paying attention to what's going on. And also, I would add, reading between the lines, because the media is not really going to give you the truth. The truth is always your responsibility. It's your and mine and our responsibility to figure it out. That's why you have to pay attention, but you don't have to, or you shouldn't just take information as it's being given. Like you watch the news and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's what's going on, and you think you understand. No, you have to almost like you have to become this detective of truth. You watch and you listen information from different sources, then you take a step back, exactly like Ray is sharing and advising. You take a step back, you reflect, and you look at the available information and go like, okay, it looks like America and China, they're in a conflict. Let me see what this is about truly, not about the agendas that different parties have an interest for me to believe. You have to understand that whenever you watch the news, there are entities, there are forces who want you to believe something that is not true. Think about that. Your view, your attention, and the way you, like what you believe to be the truth, again, believe to be the truth, not necessarily to be the truth, that is like there is an active war happening right now. It always happened and it's happening right now. And I believe that it's actually going to accelerate. There are forces who try to make things look different than they actually are. So when you pay attention what's going on between America, China, like markets and the new developments, don't take everything as it's being presented, but try to piece information together and reflect. That's why Ray talks a lot about reflection.
People always think that the future would be a slightly modified version of the present, and it's not. Okay, watch over decades, but it's like watching a person grow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you see that this is why it's important for you to, as you live your life, as you pursue your goals and your projects and you mature, it's very important for you at different times. I would recommend this weekly. Take a step back and look where things are going, because you might be missing something. If we constantly live our life on just like low level inputs and impulses, we are going to have like an incomplete information of where our life is going. That's why you see he has this arc, he draws this arc that basically points like or paints the picture of like you zooming out, looking at the economy from this perspective, looking at your life from like a high level view. Because whatever you notice from high level view, it's not what you're going to notice when you're up close. Imagine this: if I look at my hands like this, I'm not going to notice if I'm looking like this. So then that's really something that should be methodical. Meaning, and he's not recommending this, but I recommend this to my clients all the time, reflection should be something that you do. It could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, but not more than that. Because once in a while, but it has to be structured, once in a while you have to afford yourself this view. Like, look, I want to drop everything and I want to see what's going on. Let me understand what's going on in my life. Let me understand what's going on with the economy, so I understand or inform my next moves.
You watch your kid or you watch a person and your age, any age, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't see the life arc.
Yeah.
Okay. But the life arc is irrefutable. But you look at history. How did the United States come to be the United States? People will go to the places that are better than them, then stay in the places that are worse for them. This is fundamental, right?
Incentives.
Okay. So you have to make the place better.
Well, what happens next?
So you see, this is where he is pointing, and I want to clarify this, that you should always reserve yourself the ability to pivot, the ability to change, the ability to move. Because we choose, for example, a job because it pays well, and that job, in fact, might cost us more in the long term by maybe pinning us down. Then we cannot move, we cannot pivot, we cannot really do other things. You might be all the time busy, you cannot really build your business, you don't have much time for your family. So therefore you are kind of constricted. You're like, your movement becomes restricted. On the paper you might look successful, oh my god, I'm making so much money, but in reality, because you're losing your ability to pivot, you don't have so much freedom. In fact, you are paying for money with your freedom. And this is exactly what he is saying, that you should have the ability to move somewhere else. If you are in a country that doesn't treat its citizens well, you should have the freedom to find a different place, because again, people will move to where they are treated well. And this is something that will happen more and more, because a lot of things are happening and changing globally. Governments around the world are adopting different types of strategies. Some of them are more inclined for the betterment of the future, and they're more relaxed or more encouraging the development of the people, and other governments or other structures are limiting that. And he is pointing that since a lot of things are changing globally, that means you have to retain the freedom, so you can, if something happens and you see a new realization, oh, this is no longer good, I can no longer have my business here, I no longer want to have my family here, or whatever, I want to change something, to make sure that your context is not really tying you, you're not really forced to stay put, but you have the freedom to move.
Next, in history,
Well, usually there's a big fight for control.
political revolutions and things like that.
The system breaks down because they don't trust the system. In the 30s, 4 major democracies chose to be autocracies. Okay, that happened in Italy, Germany, Spain, and Japan.
What's autocracy for anyone that doesn't know the word?
Well, it means a dictatorship, essentially, of a limited number of people at the top who are autocratic, which means that they are directing things, rather than a democracy in which there's representatives of all different points of view that get together and follow rules to make decisions. Be an immigrant or whatever and change my...
So you see, I'm not saying that China is an autocracy. I'm not saying that, but one of the things that I would point out is the fact that people speak about China as like, oh, China is bad and this and that. But at the same time, if we adopt this idea that we can learn something from everyone, which I think it's actually healthy, one thing that China does well is the fact that where they are aligned, they have a certain direction. Like people, they complain about the dictatorship and all of that, but outside of that, sometimes it's a lot better to have like one direction that everyone follows, and then all the efforts are pointed in the same direction. Sometimes, again, I'm not an expert on this by all means, but this is just my opinion. Sometimes it's better, instead of just like fighting internally, which way should go? No, we should go this way. No, we should go this way. Thousands of people have thousands of directions and nobody's moving anywhere. Outside of that, sometimes it's better to just like have less voices which are aligned, and then following that, because everyone else following are going to be a concentration of force, and that's so much better to go into just like one or a few limited directions than just like going everywhere and nowhere. So from that perspective, again, my opinion in geopolitics values nothing. It's just my opinion. But I think that this is one of the advantages of China, because they are aligned. They're following, they're shooting a straight arrow, and that is very hard to beat with all this misunderstood democracy.
Location throughout history, that's been important. So the ability to go to good places and away from bad places, that's part of it. Secondly, building your financial strength is important, which has to do with how you earn, spend, and save. That will determine the amount. And then what you do with that amount is invest. And so how you invest is also important.
So you see, he shares, like, really, should be like focus. This is my focus. It's like how you earn, spend, and save. And then based on that, you have an amount, right? Like the calculation or the result of how you invest, spend, and save eventually will determine how much money you have, such that with that money or part of it, you can invest. That right there is a secret of success. If you just zoom out and ask yourself, okay, wait, what am I doing? What skill do I have that I can sell? How can I sell my time? Most people say, like, oh, don't sell your time. Like, yeah, if you're a billionaire, don't sell your time. If you're a millionaire, okay, don't sell your time. But if you're at the beginning and you're just building towards that, that's the only thing you have. Sell your time first. Make sure that you have something valuable to sell. That means it might mean that you have to go one step before that and build yourself, build skills that are valuable to other people, build value in yourself, so then you can sell your time. Once you sell your time, you're building you're going to get rewarded by the value that you're offering. This is what I'm doing in my coaching. Then second, he shares, be careful with how you spend money, because you might make money, but if your spending is not really in check, if you're spending too much as opposed or is in comparison to how much you're making, you're never going to save money. So spending is a skill in itself. This was one of my biggest lessons. It's like, it's not really how much money you make, it's how much you can save. So it's how much you can make, how much you can save, how much you can spend less, and then how much you can save. Really, that's like 3 skills in one, but each one of them are different. And from that's why he makes it separate. The next one is learning to invest. That is something worthwhile. Like, if you have time and you think, like, what should I do with my time? What should I do in 2026? Learn exactly this. Build something of value that you can make money. Learn how to spend less, like watch, audit, evaluate your spending and see what you can change so you can spend less. It doesn't mean that you have to cut everything, but be smart about it. And then save money. Saving money is a skill in itself. And then from that, if you take and allocate some of that into investment, this is how you're going to, that becomes your force multiplier. You're not going to, like me personally, I don't expect that I'm going to become rich from coaching. Like, I'm selling my time and I'm going to somehow become rich by selling my time. No. But you have to, doing those 3, then you have to find ways and you have to learn and educate yourself how to invest wisely. And then that is really the only force multiplier that might make you rich one day. That's really you studying and then eventually being methodical about life. That's why he's a very mindful person. You're going to see that he shares a lot about the fact that his success comes from the fact that he was able to think properly. The ability to think properly, imagine how important it is for you to think properly when it's about, how am I going to make money? What am I going to sell? What value can I bring? You have to think properly about yourself, how you are in this context, where things are going, what are the current trends, what are the pain points of other people that they might be ready to pay for. All of this requires proper thinking. And then in order to spend less, you have to evaluate really what's the difference between what matters and what doesn't matter. Most people spend money. Spending is easy, right? But we don't evaluate, wait, what really matters? How come I'm spending and everything looks important when in reality it's not? And that's why also this requires proper thinking to understand, wait, I imagine that this and that will be important, but I think they're a waste of money. So cut them, spend less, save more money, and then I have something to invest. I have a way to leverage myself. I have a way to leverage my money, right? Because you save money, so then now you can leverage your money by investing. And if you are into that, Ray Dalio is the person to study day and night, I swear.
So if you have your financial ability and you can make the move, and then you have knowledge, about what's happening so that you can change things, those are the things you need.
you see, this is exactly what he is sharing. Like you have to have an ability to make money, but then you also have to have the knowledge of what's going on, because again, never forget, you are functioning in a broader context, in a bigger context. You are part of a bigger bubble, and there are multiple bubbles around you that really, it's like everything is kind of like bouncing and, like hitting, or like really influencing each other, and you are part of that. So it's not just that, oh, I need to make money, then learn to spend less, save money, and then invest. Yeah, but what happens if the law changes? What happens if the market is about to crash and you are about to invest all your money? Knowing, having information about what you're doing as you are doing it is what he is pointing at.
Ability to move capital matters. And if you look at history, this has been an important consideration. Yes, so it matters. So if you're nailing yourself down and that's your primary capital and it's nailed down there, then that does limit your flexibility.
So you see, here he was actually addressing the question, should I buy a house? And he says the ability to move capital matters. Remember the flexibility, the freedom that we spoke about at the beginning of the video. It's all about freedom. Freedom for you to move, freedom for you to pivot, freedom for you to change things, and also freedom for you to move capital. If, for example, if you have like a few $1,000,000 and you buy like a $100,000 apartment, well, you're not really pinning yourself down. So in that context, you can buy a house because, well, it's not all your money and it's not like a big portion of your money. However, if all your money is $100,000 and then you buy an apartment and now you are stuck with it, then you no longer have the freedom to pivot. If things change and you realize, oh my God, I need liquid cash, I need money, and my money is stuck into this asset, and in order to sell it, to liquefy it, like right now, I would have to sell it on a discount, I would lose like a lot of money, and that really keeps you stuck. So you always have to understand what is really your context. This type of advice in general, it shouldn't be taken literal. When people say like, don't buy a house, I'm like, it depends on who you are. It depends on what's your financial situation. Don't buy a house if all you can afford is a house.
Make your work and your passion the same thing so that you're really enjoying your work. You'll have an enjoyable, satisfactory life, and you'll probably be better at your career. That, as a result, you'll probably advance and so on. So you have a happier life, and you will have probably a more successful life. But it is true that the careers that you choose will have financial implications. Mm-hmm. And if you say, I want to be a poet or something along those lines, you better consider the financial implications of that. That doesn't mean that you have to go make a ton of money, because I think a lot of people fall into that trap. So I think that what brings people happiness is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And it doesn't have much correlation past a certain level of money.
So you see, the important part is that you hear a billionaire telling you, hey, make your passion your work. Well, that's a big thing, because otherwise most people would understand like, oh, my passion doesn't matter, what I enjoy doing doesn't matter, like I need to focus on the money. And here you go, one of the most successful people on this planet telling you, no, you should make your passion your work, because this is where you're going to be better at your work. Like you are going to be literally better at what you're doing because you are enjoying it. So that's really an important part. He is also pointing to the fact that, look, you might find that your passion will not pay that much. So therefore, now you have a decision. It doesn't mean like, okay, passion is not important, let's make all the money, or money is not important, let's just like follow the passion. This is where this advice has to be considered in context. Like you have to always like take a step back and look at what are really the choices and the choices you're being presented with, and look at yourself and what matters to you, and then try to see how you can balance that out.
It doesn't have much correlation with that well-being with those lines. You better consider the financial implications of that. That doesn't mean that you have to go make a ton of money, because I think a lot of people fall into that trap. So I think that what brings people happiness is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And it doesn't have much correlation past a certain level of money. It doesn't have much correlation with that well-being, with the amount of money you have. And if you see studies across societies, and you'll see that past that certain basic level, there's no correlation between the amount of money they have and how much happiness they have. You should be around.
One thing I would add on this, and this is because I've noticed in past work with different clients that they were like very high level, high net worth individual. They found themselves, so I'm talking about people who actually they are already very successful financially, right? Most of them they find themselves at this intersection where they don't know what's next. They kind of like they feel they have achieved everything. Like I have all the money in the world, and what's next? Like what I'm not getting more happy, and sometimes I feel like that is kind of depressing. The idea that more money doesn't make me happy. One thing I would add on this, because this is what most in this situation miss. When you have more money, it is true that past a certain level, money itself will not make you more happy. However, money, just like Elon Musk is saying, I think, money is a tool. So since it's a tool, then you are after a certain threshold, although they're not going to directly make you more happy, since money is a tool, they're going to give you leverage and the ability to be more useful, to have greater impact. So this is where your happiness was kind of transformed into fulfillment. And that's really where money, like more money, if you know how to use it properly, will actually be useful. That's the only thing that I would add. Ray is not wrong in here, but that's just like something to consider, that it doesn't mean that, oh, if I make like whatever is the amount that they discover, I don't know, $74,000 a year, I don't know, $100,000 a year, whatever, right? There were studies about this, right? Whatever is that amount, it doesn't mean for you that, oh, if I reach to that amount, like that's it, game over. I'm not going to get more happy from this. Yes, you could get more happy if you use money properly in order to be even more useful, like a global scale. It's the difference between you make $100,000 because you are helping your community of like 100 people, you are building like a bakery, or versus with that money, well, I don't know, you like just like Elon Musk or some others who took that money to try to solve problems at like the humanity level, and then that is a different level of fulfillment. It's like there is a conversation about if that's happiness or not, because Elon Musk shared many times that his life is, his life is not really something that most people could live like, because it's very stressful and there is a lot of pressure, and it's very true. But at the same time, he must have like a level of fulfillment out of that, because otherwise nobody would put themselves through all that horrendous like pressure without actually getting something out of it. And it's definitely, for him, it's definitely not money, it's fulfillment, it's having a purpose, it's having impact. And that's where more money becomes useful. But that means that you have to really think about yourself, think about the money that you have and what you want to do with it and how you can use it in order to be more useful. Because most people, when they become rich, they don't do that. They don't take a step back like Ray and others and think like, okay, now I solved the money, like I have a lot of money. What do I want? What's next for me? Most people, they think like, I made it, that's it. Like they start to enjoy, they start to spend, they start to deteriorate their life because now they stopped growing. And money should not be an incentive for people to stop growing.
The people who are the best people to teach you, to operate by the mentors and the learnings and so on. You should be around the best people. And when I say best people, I mean people of good character and good capabilities, okay? And so you should be around the best, not the job that pays you the most. Learning and experiencing is the most important thing that you can do in the early part of your life cycle. I have a principle. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Okay? Your best learnings come from the pain. It's a message. Pay attention. Learn how reality works and how to deal with it differently, so you have principles for dealing with reality better.
What's the best principle?
You see, he's sharing a principle. Pain plus reflection equals progress. That means that most of the times when people have a problem, there is some sort of pain, there is some sort of struggle, they just default into this victimhood, like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? I feel bad. All the people around them, they'll be like, oh, they're so poor of you, like, I'm so sorry. They're always trying to kind of like make the pain go away. And the point is like, no, the pain is actually a signal. Pay attention, like reflect. What is this pain trying to tell me? Because I must have bumped into reality, and reality slapped me over the head, gave me some feedback, and that's painful. But it's interesting that people who don't take the time to put in the reflection, to learn the lessons so they can change their behaviors, they're bound to be slapped over and over, like psh, 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 and it never stops. But that's the beauty of it. The beauty is to find the message in the pain and use that to be better. And then you're going to see that, well, you're going to have not necessarily less pain, because you are going to be and have pain and experience at a different level, but your life is going to, the whole texture of life is going to change. And in the process of that, you're going to become more resilient towards the challenges, whatever comes your way. Now you're not like, oh my God, like panicking, but you're like, okay, I got this. I've been through many different challenges in my life. I solved all of them. No matter how many times I went down and I fall to the ground, I raise myself. I just like clean myself, and I'm back on track. Whatever comes my way, I'm like, okay, one more time. I'm going to learn also from this thing. But it's in the ability to be grateful for the pain, like whatever is the struggle. Instead of like blaming other people, blaming the circumstances, blaming God, realizing that this is the gift of God. God is telling you, look, I tell you how you can become better. Whenever is the like you get some pain, it means that you have an opportunity to grow. But you have to take it, and you can take it only through honesty and humility and being humble and self-reflection.
Principle for dealing with pain.
First of all, to calm yourself down and to get centered. Meditation has had a big beneficial effect on my life. But the ability to, in a sense, calm yourself down, and when the time is right, to reflect on what's happened, reflecting on how does reality really work, and what do I do when this happens, to that happens, is the development of principles.
How influential was transcendence?
So you see, he talks about meditation being so important, and most people don't even think about, like, they heard about meditation, be like, yeah, meditation is good, but they don't understand how foundational this is, because your whole experience, all your decisions are going through your vision. Like, you have to understand that you are processing reality as you go. And that processing engine, your mind, and how noisy and chaotic, or versus how calm and like serene that is, it's going to very largely dictate on how your life or what is the kind of life that you are building. Like, your whole results are based on how you process reality. So then he says, like, whenever something comes my way, and especially it's painful, I take a step back and I'm like, okay, let me see what this is. Like, let me process this properly, because there is value here, and I know I can get better. Instead of just like instantly reacting to the pain and trying to escape it, like most people, he processes this through meditation and then reflection. But you see, it's more like meditation first, so you can calm down, and reflection afterwards, because now you have the calmness in your mind to process things properly. You cannot really reflect when you are not calm. So that's why I would say that the structure here is like, okay, there is pain, zoom out, take a step back, disconnect, and just feel when you're ready to reflect, to analyze, okay, what just happened? Like, what's going on? And as he shares and he shows through his example, like he is so successful, this actually works if you manage to have your life guided by always like sitting back and trying to really observe what's going on and process things almost like in slow motion. You're going to be a lot more successful personally and financially.
Mental meditation in your success.
Oh, enormously successful, enormously significant. To reflect on what's happened, reflecting on how does reality really work, and what do I do when this happens, to that happens is the development of principles.
How influential was transcendental meditation in your success?
Oh, enormously successful, enormously significant, very, very, very significant. In other words, that way of seeing things. We're talking about reflection. You asked me reflection, okay? If you can reflect in that quality way, then you deal with anything. You make advances.
Yeah, that's very. You can literally. He says it. You can deal with anything. Think about this. I cut this part, but he shared at one point in the video that he lost his son. I think when his son was 42, died in the car crash. I'm not sure about the details of that, but he had to deal with this outside of everything else. And imagine, he shared in the video that he went through exactly the same process. It was very hard, but I had to take a step back and meditate and cool myself down and try to process reality properly, because otherwise you're going to just go into reaction mode and you're going to lose your way.
You will have setbacks, okay? If you reflect well and you learn how reality works and how you will deal with it, you will get past that and go on.
One very important thing to mention here, he says, if you reflect well, what that means, at least one of the things that I want to get your attention to, is that you can reflect in not healthy ways. If you, for example, if you take a person that is always victimizing themselves and they reflect on their situation, like what just happened, but the story they are telling, it's a story of victimhood, where everything and everyone else is to blame for whatever just happened. That is not really you reflecting well. So reflecting well, he doesn't mention it here, but definitely he is pointing at it. It has to have this element of self-accountability, like responsibility, always thinking about what could I have done better? Always pointing fingers at you and yourself and avoiding to point fingers at something or someone else.
Are you a religious person?
I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. We're all part of this greater whole. Okay? We're all part of the greater whole. And if you could see yourself as part of the greater whole and love the greater whole and whatever, that is spirituality. The greatest tragedy of mankind, because it so easily can be fixed, is holding a strong opinion that is wrong, that you could have made right, better, if you were open to learning more. If you said, I want to be stress tested. I want my thinking to be stress tested. I want to make sure that I'm making the better decision, and so I'll be challenged. But a lot of people view that challenging like a fight. It's not a fight. If somebody holds a different opinion, it should prompt a curiosity. You know, I don't know. Am I wrong or is they wrong? There's a 50% chance. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. How do you do?
So you see, that's why we are, like, we possess beliefs that we don't know where they are coming from, but we act and we conduct our life as if they are true. Never to take the time to actually question and reflect, like, wait, why do I believe this? Why do I believe things are in certain way? And I saw him posting on Twitter, X, recently. He was asking, like, why people don't want to really consider a different opinion than theirs. And that is because, well, people don't really want their view to be challenged, because they're not able to cope with that. Like, they're not really truth seekers. They're not oriented towards truth. They are oriented towards preserving their own image, their own identity. Because if they might realize that they were wrong, their whole identity breaks down. So knowing that they cannot really cope with that, they just reject. Like, no, I know the truth. I don't want to know. It's like, blah, blah, blah. And they shut down. And he says that this is the greatest tragedy. And I agree, because the problems that we have in our life are based on our stupid things that we believe. Like, we believe so many stupid things that they were like just passed down to us by other people who never think about other stupid things that they were passed down to them. And because nobody's questioning, nobody is using critical thinking, guess what? We're just continuing the cycle of pain through different generations. We pass on stupidity and pain from generation to generation, and nobody sits down to think like, wait, why are we doing things this way? There is a better way. Why do we have to fight? We could collaborate. And this is exactly what he is pointing at.
How do you do more and more when your brain has a capacity limit? Okay. And there's only a certain number of hours in the day or the week. Okay. You have to know how to do that.
Is that focus or is that something?
No. It's knowing how to do it through others. Okay. It's knowing how to pick others and orchestrate well. It's like running a symphony or whatever. Okay. Get the best players. Okay. When I say, good character and good capabilities, and orchestrate them well. And then provide that leverage. Like when I was doing the most, I had 30 direct reports. Whatever the number is, it's always, the process is how to get more out of a minute or a day, not how to work harder. Okay, it's how to leverage yourself. And you're going to leverage yourself by picking the right people who you can trust. They're not going to screw you. They're going to operate in your interest, and they're going to be capable. And so a lot of people, what you can do is you can deal with them, and then you can say, I would deal with them on this 30 reports. I'd have maybe an hour meeting with them once every 2 weeks. And they'd go off and do things. And when you do that, you can even find people who are much better at things than you would be if you did them. It's meaning.
Yeah. So people in your life are so important. It's so important. Almost like the success that you're going to enjoy is going to largely be determined by who is in your life, who is in your corner. And most people really don't pay attention to this. Like, we don't really select or filter people in our life mindfully. Most of the times we select people based on how much money we can make, maybe what advantages we can get. Like, if you really look at how truthfully people allow other people in their life, really character is not really the main thing. And it should be, because eventually, no matter what happens, you are going to have to deal with that person in a scenario or situation that is something is on the line. There is high stake environment. Something is going down. And what you're going to have to deal with, who shows up, is their character. And most people don't recognize this. They like people just because, oh my God, we have things in common. Oh my God, we are colleagues at work. We are this and that. We come from the same high school. None of that matters. What really matters is character. And even character is not something that you are going to see when people know that you are watching them, because then you're not going to, they are going to show up their best character, right? But you are going to see their character first through consistency. So this is throughout time. And then you are going to see this in like small little things. But you're not going to see their character by asking them, why did you do this? Because instantly they are going to try to apply makeup. They are going to try to repaint the picture. Oh, no, I didn't do this because I did it because. And of course, their self-depiction of their action is going to be always going to be self-interest or like self-serving, right? But you have to pay attention to people in silence. You have to really observe and not really question them, because the moment when you question people, they are going to fight that image that you saw. But of course, in all fairness, when you observe people and you are looking for their character, because this is what he is pointing at, you have to also be fair and a little bit forgiving, in the sense that, you don't have to be unforgiving, like, oh my God, one thing, you cut them, that's it, like character matters. Not like that, but in the sense that you can be forgiving, a little bit forgiving when it makes sense, but not to the point where they are going to start to abuse your kindness, something like that.
I'm excited.
They are talking about AI, robotics, all the advancements in technology.
I think it all comes down to human nature. Okay, I'm excited in that fast forward, make the most of it, jump on it. Woo! I'm excited. I've also watched the evolution of species. Almost all species have come and gone for certain reasons. And one of the reasons that they have come and gone is because almost their strengths are not in all respects great strengths. You can use these things, intelligence, to your detriment. And I believe that the things that these technologies and so on bring us, while very important, it extends life expectancy and all of that, is not as important as human nature. And so if you were to go back in time and we're different societies, do you have happier societies? Is the well-being greater? Okay, so you can go 50 years ago and you might say the well-being is greater 50 years ago. Not in all ways, not in many ways the technologies and the consequences of those are much better, but you may have had a better life. And it's human nature. of how people are going to deal with each other. So I think the real question is, can people rise above this? And which it goes back to the spirituality question. Can people then rise above it so that they think of the collective good and they think of, collectively, how do we make the best? And also karma, in other words, the realization that if I help you in ways that can be so simple for me to help you make such a big difference in your life, and you do the same, and we have win-win relationships, it'll be good. But if we don't do that, and I worry about human nature, and I worry about this process.
Yeah, he's excited about what's going on and all the developments, which is exciting to begin with. But he is worried about the human nature, and I agree. If you look at COVID, what happened in COVID, right? The most egregious things were actually guided by people who overreacted. They were people who were scared, people who misunderstand really their role. Or you can understand that in times like this, whatever is the context, it's people who are really the danger. Because, and I'm not saying this in kind of like I'm against people. Well, I'm a human, I'm in team human, but truthfully, that is where the danger is coming. The danger is not really the technology, it's some people that might be behind that technology or use it in ways that might be dangerous. And it's the human nature that he is pointing, which is basically you're pointing at an infinite possibility. Human nature means anything is possible. And since anything is possible, we really don't know. That looks to be the conclusion. I'm excited, but we really don't know. And I'm worried about the human nature. He is trying to wake people up. Like, look, we don't need to fight with each other. Like, we can collaborate. We can work together. Why do we need to be against each other? This is what I call, in my own understanding, I call this the we truly mindset. We truly mindset means like, look, we have differences and we can be separated by lines and categories in so many different ways, right? But at the same time, why do we focus on the differences? Because the differences are exactly what creates the separation, and that separation is exactly what creates most of the problems today. Most of the conflict today is generated by this idea that I don't want to understand, or I don't have compassion towards your point of view, what might be going on in your shoes, and you have no compassion to what might be going on in my shoes. And everyone is fighting with these invisible demons, like everyone is perceiving all the other people or clubs or groups or parties to be the enemy. And everyone is at war with someone else and other people. And in the process of that, we all lose. And this would require really awakening. It will require people to realize that, oh, we are literally pitted against each other. We are forced to fight battles that are not really our own. And that, to be honest, it would require awakening at the global scale. And that is not something to be expected, but at the same time, it looks like it would be necessary, unless of maybe some sort of global event that would unite us all. There are no good options here. That's what it looks like.
My benefit is that I want to pass along these things, and we're doing it together. And I have.
So this is where approaching the ending. He is sharing, look, I'm doing this. I went to this podcast because this is what I get value. I get value by sharing this, by passing this to as many people as possible, because this is what I care about. And my God, he is a living legend. He is a good man. Not just respect for him. I feel like, oh my God, if I would meet this man, I think I would kiss his hand. It's like such a good example of a good human being, successful, but not really like most people who are successful and they make a lot of money, and their money is made through all sorts of dubious, shady ways. You can see on him that, well, I don't know, I don't know everything about his life. Maybe at one point he did some things that are questionable. Who knows? Yeah, we are people, but he has good character and he has good human nature. That paired with the fact that he is successful is rare. And that's why I think people should pay attention to him. This is the ending. Let's see what he has to say. Look at his reaction one more time.
And they're all young people in that first season of their life, and there's something in all of these books that's pushed them closer to their success and their happiness. So thank you on behalf of me, because you've had a profound impact on me. But
Thank you for giving me that joy.
Thank you for giving me that joy. Look how humble he is. Ray Dalio, definitely I'm going to make other videos about him. This man needs to be studied. He needs to be studied not only about his financial success, but also about his personal success. This man is successful at life.